During the Great Famine of 1847 in Ireland, when there was 2 million people either displaced or killed by the British government, the biggest question I ever get as a tour guide in Ireland is, why didn't Irish people just eat fish during the Great Famine? Of course, the potato blight destroyed all the potatoes and mostly the main food that Irish people, poor Irish people, could eat during this time. But to my understanding, the British government just wouldn't let them fish, and in Ireland, they had a massive stockpile of food, but it was all shipped out to Britain and to English colonies, and not fed to the Irish people. The famine, they call it a famine of the potato blight. It was really a genocide of the Irish people. The British didn't care, they wanted the Irish people to die, and they didn't feed the Irish people, The British government at the time hated the Irish people, guys, and they just wanted us to all die. They wanted the land to be for themselves. It was a colony, they owned us, and then obviously we fought back and we got our independence to become the Republic of Ireland, and it's great to see. But yeah, it is an age-old question. We're about to get this one answered today. This video has 1 million views. We'll talk a little about the guy after, but this one's gonna be amazing. Like, comment, subscribe, and let's hear what he says about it.
In the late 1840s, Ireland was devastated by one of the worst famines in modern European history, the Great Hunger, that devastated the island. Between 1846 and the early 1850s, around 1 million people died and 1 million people emigrated.
Yep.
The population fell by 20 to 25%. Now, this famine was triggered by something called potato blight, which destroyed the potato crop in Ireland at the time. I'll explain more about that later on in this video. But a lot of people wonder, why didn't Irish people, while they faced starvation, turn to the seas? Ireland is surrounded by some of the best fishing grounds in Europe.
Yep.
Yet, in this sea of plenty, the country was devastated by a famine. Now, you'll read online bizarre explanations as to why people didn't eat fish. Some people will claim that they were superstitious. I've read as well that people just didn't like fish or they didn't know how to fish. Now, none of this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're starving to death, lads, like my great-great-grandparents were in World War I, and then their grandparents were kind of around the potato blight that time. And, if you're starving to death, guys, I would imagine my ancestors would have just eaten them anyway, even if you didn't like them. I mean, everybody loves fish. I love fish, personally. But yeah, if you're starving to death, beggars can't be choosers. No, it was because the British government wanted them all to die.
If people are starving, they'll eat anything. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you why Irish people didn't eat fish during the Great Hunger, or certainly didn't eat fish enough to save them from starvation. And this story is really tragic, and it'll probably make you pretty angry as well. But before I get into this, just let me introduce myself. My name is Finn Dwyer. I'm an Irish historian. I post 2 videos to this channel every week, so make sure you subscribe. I'm also the creator of the Irish History podcast. You can find links to that beneath this video as well. But let's get into the history of why Irish people didn't eat fish during the Great Hunger. Okay.
Command Dwyer, let's go. Let's hear what he has to say about it.
To start this story, let's look at the Great Hunger, that famine that devastated Ireland in the late 1840s. So the famine was triggered in 1845 by something called potato blight. This was a fungus that ravaged the potato crop in Ireland, and it devastated the crop in 1846. Not so much in 1847, but again in 1848, and to a lesser extent in 1849. Now
we actually, if anyone's a farmer in Ireland, my family does kind of some farming, or my grandparents used to farm and shit like that, but obviously we don't do much farming anymore. I live in the West, of course, but for anybody that does farming, there's actually blight-free potatoes now. We actually have potatoes that have a gene or whatever in them that doesn't even allow them to have blight. Kind of cool technology to find out that 2 million of our people were flipping killed or displaced by this flipping blight, by this famine, this poverty. Could have been prevented if we had these potatoes that we have nowadays,
Blight affected people in lots of countries in Europe. But why did it have such a terrible effect in Ireland? Now, to understand this, we need to look at what Irish people were eating in 1845, because this is going to shock you.
If you look younger than your
So,
age,
hold on a second. My understanding is this, as an Irish tour guide, is the Irish people in the day were eating like pounds of potatoes every day. They were eating like 5 to 10 pounds of potatoes. It was just like an outrageous amount of potatoes. And there was nothing else, because potatoes is starch, and I'm a very big health and fitness expert as well. It can give you all the nutrients. It actually has vitamin C in it. It has a lot of nutrients that you wouldn't think that are in Potatoes are the best, crop ever. But, if you start eating stuff like rice or anything else, it doesn't really have nutrients in it. Potatoes have a lot of nutrients in them, and they're very, very filling as well. And they can make you work hard. It's a carbohydrate, it makes you work hard, towing the field, picking turf. So it makes sense, right?
In 1945, about 3 million Irish people, the overall population, I should say, was about 8 to 9 million people, but about 3 million people, that's a third of the population, ate almost nothing else other than potatoes.
Yeah.
The reason they ate these potatoes is because they had very little land, and potatoes are actually quite a healthy thing to eat if you can't grow much else. Like, they grow in really poor soils, and also they grow in huge quantities. So you could feed a family in Ireland in the 1840s off about an acre of land if you grew potatoes. Now, the amount of potatoes that people ate is just absolutely astonishing. So, for example, an adult male ate about 6 kilos of potatoes every single day.
So 12 to 14 pounds. So I was actually wrong. I always use kilos as a measurement, but when it comes to like little weights, I use pounds. But like 6 kilos of potatoes every day is outrageous, lads. Try and eat. Go to your kitchen, get like a pound of potatoes. It's a lot of potatoes, guys. But if you're eating a lot of them, you feel healthy, guys. Pure carbohydrate, a high sugar diet. That's the diet that I eat. I eat a high sugar, high protein, low fat diet. Very healthy. It's a poor person's healthy diet. If you eat high carbs, very, very healthy, but it's also a poor person's diet. These people were poor, obviously, my ancestors, okay?
12 to 14 pounds if you use imperial measurements, but that's an extraordinary amount of potatoes for anyone to eat. And while that might sound unbelievable, that's attested to by accounts from the time. So you can see that if a third of the population are eating almost nothing but potatoes, then that crop gets absolutely devastated by this fungus, the blight that breaks out. You can see how it pushes Irish society into a catastrophe. Now, there's lots of other reasons behind this. Notably, British policies made everything way worse, and I'm going to make videos about that. I'm actually thinking of making an entire series on the Great Hunger of the 1840s, because it's so hard to explain this. If you want to...
Yeah, you should, brother. Dwyer. I'm not sure where he's from in Ireland, but I'm sure he's from Dublin somewhere, or Cork or something like that.
That series, just drop a comment below. But the question of why Irish people didn't eat fish is a really good one, because as I said at the start of the video, Ireland is surrounded by some of the richest fishing grounds anywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
But people didn't turn to the seas. So next I'm going to explain that by first looking at what fishing was like in Ireland in 1845. So you'll often hear the claim that Irish people didn't know how to fish in the 1840s, and that's why they didn't turn to the seas. But that's not true. There's lots of coastal communities where people did fish. They were part-time fishermen who would have had a farm where they grew potatoes, and then they would also engage in a bit of fishing. But what Ireland didn't have in the 1840s was a fishing industry. So no matter how much fish people at the coast caught, it would have to be moved around the island to save Ireland from a famine in the 1840s.
Oh, yeah.
And that meant that that fish would have had to be processed in factories, it would have had to have been preserved and then moved around the island. And that
presumably, if you were a fisherman, you were living quite luxurious during those days, even though a lot of people didn't have food. If you were a fisherman, my dad, O'Flaherty, just down the road, my friend's dad was actually born on the Aran Islands. Okay, the Aran Islands is obviously just, it's just past the sea right there, right? It's just kind of close, And I've been on the Aran Islands a few times, but he was actually a fisherman, and he grew up speaking fluent Irish and, all that kind of thing. But he actually would fish full time just for, as a kid, as a child, and he would just eat the fish out the sea. Because we have some of the best fish in Ireland. It's just crazy, So you wonder, did they have fish back in those days? So, of course they did.
That industry didn't exist. And the reason it didn't exist is because the British government, who ruled Ireland at the time, had run down the fishing industry in the previous decades to protect British industry.
British bastards again.
So let's look at that next, because that helps you understand why Irish people just couldn't replace the potato with fish. So throughout our history, stretching back thousands of years, Irish people have fished. There's evidence of that in archaeological sites. You can see it in the Middle Ages, right through into the modern period.
Yep.
And in the 17th and 18th century, you can see that a fishing industry was starting to develop in Ireland, where you would have had fish preservation, and that these coastal communities would catch huge amounts of fish that would be preserved and then moved around the island. However, after something called the Act of Union in 1800, that was where basically Ireland was brought into the United Kingdom and ruled directly from London.
crazy. Sorry guys, I don't have YouTube Premium, but yeah, absolutely crazy. The British government pursued a policy called the Act of Union. Okay, I didn't know too much. I know a little bit about this, not too much. Oh, hold up, guys. It was ruled directly from London. Yeah, so London, so all the shit that's happening in Ireland was ruled directly from London. So I did know about that, yeah.
London. The British government basically pursued a policy that in the long term ran down the Irish fishing industry.
Jeez.
So in the 1820s, they had this policy where they did actually provide funding for the building of harbours. They also provided loans where fishermen bought new modern fishing vessels. But these were all pulled out in the 1820s and 1830s. And the reason they did this was to benefit the British fishing industry.
Yeah.
This is a common economic policy that you'll see from the British government in the 19th century in the lead up to the famine, where they reorganised the Irish economy so it benefits Britain rather than Ireland. So by 1845, you still have lots of these coastal communities who do engage in small scale fishing. Like they're catching fish that's sold locally, but it's not a fishing industry. Now, the question is though, even in some of those coastal communities, they couldn't turn to fishing during the Great Hunger. And to understand that, we need to look at what happened when the Great Famine started in 1845. So as I'm sure you know, the Great Famine was triggered by the collapse of the potato crop in 1845 after blight devastated the crop. Now, Irish people were used to crises at the time, and they had all these strategies for survival. Like, for example, after the potato crop failed, people faced a financial crisis, and what they did is turn to pawn shops. So they took in farm implements, anything they could have, even sometimes their clothes, into these pawn shops to get money. Now, in coastal communities, fishermen, tragically, they brought in their nets, their fishing gear, their boats to pawn shops in the hope that the crisis would ease after 1 year and then they'd be able to get their equipment back. Unfortunately, what happens is the famine gets worse in the second year. That's 18.
Oh shit, that actually just hit me to my core. So they thought that the famine wasn't going to last that long, because of course you wouldn't really think, you know, oh shit, the potato blight, okay, this crop failed, but next year's crop will be fine. Nope. This shit lasted a while, okay? So they handed in their nets, and then the fishermen thinking like, okay, we'll be able to buy our nets back next year. We'll just, for the money that we get from the potatoes. Nope, done for. Oh, that's so rough.
46, rather than better. So these fishermen have no way of recouping their fishing gear that's all in these shops. And you can see it at the time. There's these tragic accounts. Actually, I want to play one for you now. This is read by the actor Aidan Crowe. And Aidan here reads the account of an Englishman called James Hack Tuke. He was a Quaker, a member of the Society of Friends, and he came to Ireland to try and help those suffering from famine. But this account is what he saw on Achill Island in 1847. Now, Achill Island is situated off the west coast of Ireland, if you're not familiar with it. It's in the...
So Achill Island's just down the way from me as well. I've only been there like once, I think, but it's only like an hour or two away, or an hour away.
Atlantic Ocean, there's huge fishing grounds off that island. But there he found people starving. And this is how he explained the tragic situation.
This is rough.
While standing upon the magnificent cliffs of Achill, overlooking the wild Atlantic,
rough,
I saw the deep inlets and bays of that island literally filled with shoals of mackerel and herring.
Ooh.
Indeed, the whole surface of the sea seemed to be completely alive with them.
Whoa.
Around me stood groups of hungry creatures who looked down upon this inexhaustible supply of food, wholly unable to procure the fish to allay their cravings. One fishing boat, 3 or 4 currachs alone were engaged, where there was employment for hundreds, and the food for thousands of hungry creatures on the island.
Now that's an app.
So that's horrendous. So they're saying that they had tons. Wow, I think I've read about this before. They said they had tons of food on Achill Island, but they just couldn't. There was only 2 or 3 ships that were trying to reel them in with the ropes and the fucking, what do you call them, the nets, you know, where the mackerel. God, I just had mackerel this morning. I love mackerel. Oh, that's tragic, guys. The Irish ancestors had to die because they couldn't. There was tons of people looking at the fish, and there was so much fish they couldn't even get enough people to fish for them. Wow, what a travesty, guys. Oh. It makes your heart break, honestly.
Absolutely tragic situation. But even had these people been able to fish, if they'd had all their fishing gear, it still wouldn't have made the situation across the entire island dramatically different. Because, as we've already seen, there was no fishing plants where these fish could be preserved and then shipped around the island. Because, obviously, if you don't preserve fish, it'll go rotten in a couple of days. But on top of that, I think there's other reasons that even if Ireland had had a fishing industry and a way to preserve this fish, I still don't think that would have saved people in the late 1840s, because at the core of the famine was a British free market policy that insisted that food would be sold to essentially the highest bidder. And you see this in 1846. You've probably heard about the export of crops from Ireland during the famine. That's completely true.
This is the woke left disagree with this, but huge quantities of food were exported from Ireland. We had tons of food in Ireland. Just the British government were not allowing us to distribute it. They just said no. And actually, it was this bad. The Irish people made the food. We were the ones actually creating the food. And then the British government would take it off us and sell it like, oh, what a travesty, man. You look back and you're like, this is crazy. Like, you know, these certain communities in different countries have horrendous, you know, slavery and this stuff. We have just horrendous history in this country. Like,
huge quantities of food were exported from Ireland, and this was done at the behest of the British government that wanted to preserve free markets. So had there been a fishing industry in Ireland that produced tons of fish, I think what would have happened is that too, along with lots of the other foodstuffs in Ireland, that would simply have been exported.
Oh, 100%. If we had a massive fishing industry, it would have all been taken from us as well.
So hopefully you've got a sense now about why Irish people didn't eat fish during the Great Hunger. And the next time you hear someone say something idiotic like that Irish people simply didn't like fish or were superstitious about eating fish,
that's stupid.
You can set them straight. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I'm thinking of making an entire series on the Great Hunger.
Go like, subscribe, donate to his stuff as well. That's a great video. Why the Irish people didn't eat fish during the Great Famine. You know, I kind of knew a few different things. Like, we were taught a few different things in school. But, you know, the fact that they actually had tons of fish on the island of Achill Island and these different places, but they just weren't able to, you know, procure it and actually distribute it to the whole country. You know, that's next level. That's amazing video. So that's Irish History Podcast. Go check him out. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want to support me, hit the join link underneath this video as well. Become a member, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.